This is Prairie Views, an episode of Prairie Engineers. And today I have a guest with me. His name is Drew Hauser. And Drew, why don't you just take a few seconds and tell us a little bit about you and what you do at Prairie?
Yeah, as you mentioned, my name's Drew Hauser. I am a junior civil engineer here at Prairie, mostly focusing on water resources, so roadway drainage, bridge, hydraulics and hydrology, and some other things where I can help out with. So,
But mostly water resource work.
yes, yep, mostly water
Yeah.
resources work.
Now, is that something that you've always done, or has that been a shift?
That's actually been a shift. Well, in engineering, it's been mostly what I've done, but I actually did previously went to school for a completely different degree, athletic training, and then got introduced to the engineering side of things at a previous job. And long story short, went back to school and decided to go into civil engineering, water resources focus. So
Nice. Yeah.
I've
I think the first time I met you, Drew, you told me that you pitched, right? In baseball, weren't
yes,
you a
yep,
pitcher?
yes,
Yeah, that's great. So pitcher turned engineer. It works
yeah,
for me.
yeah.
So, Drew, what's one of the more interesting places that you've either been surveyed or had some kind of engineering project?
Yes, it might not be crazy interesting to a lot of people, but for me, I really enjoyed it. I went up to Appleton, Wisconsin for a hydrographic survey to help out, and that was really eye-opening. It was a great learning experience. We graphed some areas in front of dams around a spillway. We think we did two separate dams up in Appleton, if I remember correctly. Um, but yeah, it was eye-opening experience. I really didn't know all that went into it. I learned a lot, and we got to get up and close and personal to on a boat to some of the dams that you really don't get to do that if you're just recreational boating. So that was really fun.
Yeah, you go past the safety buoys,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
get
and
to
we
go
had
where
to,
no other boats
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
That's cool. And so what prompted you to be on the boat and be gathering that data with the hydrographic surveyors?
I actually got asked to go up there, and if I was interested in doing it, I think it's a great learning experience for newer engineers to understand. I feel like what's going into some of these projects or into the survey side of it. So I think it was more of a learning experience, and they needed help, and they asked me, and I volunteered to go up there. So I
Uh,
don't think I touched the job after that. So, but no,
Yeah.
it was cool.
It's interesting. Some of the folks that I've interviewed previously, it seems like most folks at our firm are most fascinated with the hydrographic surveying
Yeah,
services of our
yeah,
company. Like there's just something about, getting paid to be out on a boat
yeah.
that
Yeah.
everybody's
If it
like,
was,
oh, yeah, I'd
I
like
wish it
to
was
do
the
that.
middle of summer when I went up. It was October, the end of October, and it was windy and cold up in Wisconsin. So that was a treat, but I dressed
Yeah.
appropriately, so it was't terrible.
So did you see the video of Tristan on the Chicago River?
Yes, yeah, I
For
did see
yeah,
that.
that looked miserable,
Yeah, yeah,
honestly. That looked so cold.
yes.
Um, well, speaking of, like, if you could switch roles with anybody at Prairie, who would you switch roles with for a day and why?
Yeah, I don't know if I could capture everything that they do in a day, but it would probably be Lisa or Darren just to see what goes into Prairie Engineers, what makes it tick. I don't really have a big business background in much of anything, so I think seeing that side of an engineering firm would be interesting and see all that goes into it.
So, like the business and operational
Yeah,
aspects.
yes, yep,
Yeah, yeah, for
yep.
sure. I know you may or may not know this, but I got into this whole gig of marketing for engineering because my dad was a civil engineer that owned his
Oh,
own
I did
engineering
not know
firm.
that.
Yeah, so like I grew up around somebody who had that perspective of not just engineering because he was an engineer and he did projects, but like actually running a business and being responsible for
Yeah,
people's livelihoods and careers. And
yeah,
it's a whole different level of responsibility
yeah,
for sure.
yep,
So what's something that you do that your friends and family like you wish they understood about like your job, but they just don't get it. They don't
yeah.
understand it.
I like this question. It's the first thing that pops up to mind is when you talk with friends or family and they ask you what you do. I'm a civil engineer, but I focus in water resources, and I explain to them roadside drainage, kind of what I did at the beginning of this video, bridge hydraulics and hydrology, stuff like that. And I don't think they realize all of the planning and the work that goes into something that they use most of every day. I mean, they have roadways and bridges, but the hydro or the water resources side of it, I think, is eye-opening for a lot of them. 'Cause they think, oh, water goes downhill. Well, yeah, but there's a lot that affects going downhill if it's done properly. You know, you don't want to cause erosion. You don't want bridges collapsing from erosion. So I feel like it's something that is overlooked, and I like explaining and kind of deep diving into them. They probably get annoyed with me because I might go into too much detail with them, but I think it gives a good perspective of what goes on that they might not see. So,
Like something like in your answer, and I know I've known other hydrologists, you know, hydraulics and hydrologist
hmm
engineers, and one of the things that I always really fascinates me is people don't recognize the destructive force of water.
oh yeah,
They just it's so much more destructive than what a lot of people really think it is. And it doesn't take a whole lot, and it doesn't have to move that fast
yeah,
for it to
yeah,
be quite destructive.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that way you put that too. That's very, very true.
Yeah. So as an engineer, you have to be able to manage not just where the water's going, but how fast it's going there and how much of it
hmm
and how
Yep.
fast is, you
Yeah.
know, that
And
makes
you
a
have
huge
to,
difference.
yeah, you have to, and if you have to detain it, you know, how much do you have to detain, and how fast can you release that water? And yeah, there's a lot.
Right. So like what advice would you have if somebody watches this today or is watching us right now and is thinking about making a career move to Prairie? Maybe they're not happy where they're at. What advice would you give someone considering working for Prairie?
Yeah, this is from a personal experience. I got hired when I graduated with my civil engineering degree, so I haven't been in another firm, but I had a couple options to choose from. And one thing that I asked Darren in my interviews if I could have a contact to someone that was around the same role that I would be having. And I got the opportunity to talk to someone at Prairie, and that's really what actually persuaded me to join Prairie Engineers. So it, I don't know if it's because most people, if they're leaving a firm, they know what to expect. But I think if you're a newer engineer asking that person that does that day to day, what it's like day to day, what they enjoy, being able to talk to someone at Prairie, I think would be a was a huge persuasion for me personally. So I think that'd be my advice.
I would think it was a red flag if you were considering a job somewhere and you asked the person who was interviewing you, hey, could I have the name of somebody that's already working and doing kind of the thing that I'm doing, and can I talk to them? And if they're like, no, we don't do that,
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah,
like,
that would
okay,
be a big red
red
flag.
flag,
Yes,
you know.
yes,
I did the same thing when
yeah,
they hired me. I asked for several people, you know, to contact them and ask them about their experience working at Prairie, and Lisa was and Darren were all too happy to say you can talk to anybody you want. You know,
yeah,
we'll give you any name, any number. Feel free to talk to them as much as you want to talk to them, and
yeah,
ask them whatever you want to ask them. So even that response alone was like, oh, okay, yeah,
yeah,
they are very
yeah,
confident in their culture and that it's a good
yes.
culture. So.
Yeah.
Um, so describe a time when a project did not go like you planned, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, we had a project where we were doing roadside drainage, so ditches and culverts. There were no bridges, but this area was very flat and it had a lot of flooding issues. We spent a lot of time making sure we met standards, making sure that we had proper drainage. And one of the solutions where we was raising the road, but also raising ditches, and that's something the client didn't want. And I think looking back, being able to open and clear with the client, we should have went to the client earlier uh, and asked them, told them our problem and what, you know, tell them the solution that we were currently thinking of, and being able to bounce ideas off of our client, because there's things that they want that they might not express up front. So I think open and clear communication with clients is something I took away from that. I don't have a whole lot of contact with clients just because of I'm a junior civil engineer, but I would like to be more contact with clients in my future career. So I think that's one thing I took from it.
Yeah, so it's so amazing how often like you get that, and that's true in any business, to be honest with
Hmm.
you, whether you're engineering a rail bed or, selling t-shirts at the mall. It's like no matter what you're doing, communicating effectively and listening to a
Yeah.
client is so super important.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're paying you to provide something for them that they need.
Yeah.
And so you can it's easy to make assumptions, right? Even as an engineer, it's easy to make
Yep.
assumptions like, oh, they want this. But really, the more important thing, which is the lesson you learned which is, I probably ought to ask. I probably ought to
Yeah.
let them know what's going on and get their input before we
Hmm.
just, go for it.
Yeah.
Um, so what project are you most proud of, and why that project?
Yeah. It's it. Once again, it's kind of maybe for some more experienced engineers, nothing crazy, but probably the most proud project that I've worked on as I started and completed a plan set for a storm sewer design, plan set. That's the first time I've done that as a junior or as a entry level engineer. Um, and I think the reason I'm proud of it is because I was happy with what we put out and gave the client, but also the amount of learning that happened in that short amount of time was crazy. The things I could have done different to make my life easier, but also, the project manager's life easier, or someone else coming in to look at the project. So, uh, yeah, I think it was more just the learning experience that I was more proud of than anything on that.
Uh, yeah, I was just writing an article earlier today about the freedom to fail. And part of success for everything in life is learning how to fail
Hmm.
and learning from failure,
Yeah.
right? So but it's a tricky tightrope that you have to walk, because you can't make big failures or you could lose your job,
Yeah.
or lose your
Yeah.
license. But there's
Yeah.
little tiny failures you can make along the way that are acceptable, failures to help you learn.
Yeah.
It's an interesting balance. So what's something valuable that you've learned from collaborating with maybe other teams at Prairie or other disciplines, either at Prairie or maybe with another consultant that we were teamed with?
Yeah. I would say as an engineer, we have the topo, usually provided information topo, uh, as built, and we can see a lot of aerial imagery. But working with surveyors, I've realized how much stuff they not purposely overlook, but how easy it is to overlook items out in the field. I had a job where I was working with a surveyor, and he went out there for a second time to look at something that he missed, and it was eye opening because I understood once I was able to get boots on the ground with them. I was like, okay, this is why I could understand why this might have not been looked at the first time around. So I think having the patience is what I learned from surveying, just because of how much stuff actually goes out in the field. You're not just worried about what to pick up, but you're worried about traffic. You're worried about your surroundings. There's a lot of other things that goes through their mind in the field than what we have behind a computer screen, um, and all that visual information that we pick up that they might not see. So
Great. So we're we're coming up on about 14 minutes, so I'm gonna jump into some quick fire questions
yeah.
to round out the episode. We want to respect people's time this afternoon. So quick fire, what has been your favorite hunting experience?
Yeah, real quick, I just had one. It was my first Western hunt, and my dad got to go with me, which is huge. But I went out to Arizona and hunted mule deer out in the desert, so that was probably my most memorable, um, and something that I'm looking forward to doing again. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember you telling me a little bit about that last time we visited, and that was a cool story. No,
yes,
we'll save
yeah,
it for another video, but
yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so vacation destination, ocean or mountains?
I'd say it's split. Growing up, we used to go to the beach all the time, and when actually I got engaged to my wife, we were on the beach, and then the next day we flew out to the mountains. So I'd say a split would be
Oh
very nice.
man, nice. Go to Italy and you can get both. There's some
Yeah,
places in the world you can go, ocean to mountain all in the same day.
yes, yeah,
Or Alaska even. Of course, we don't think of beaches when we think of
yeah.
Alaska, but
That's true.
uh and so you're a big sports fan. Who do you think should be this year's MVP for the NFL for football?
Ah.
And why?
Just from what I've seen, I mean, Barkley is very close just with how well he's done this year, and but also I'm a big fan of Josh Allen, so I kind of lean towards him a little bit more. Um, just especially watching his last few games of the season was just incredible. All the rushing and yeah, I think if I had to pick, probably just Josh Allen, just because of how well the Bills have done. And his last couple games I've
Yeah.
seen just been awesome and fun to watch.
The phenomenal quarterback. Yeah. And if I weren't a Chiefs fan, I would agree with you. So, all right, man, Drew, I appreciate you coming on and visiting with us today. So,
Yeah, this
this
was
was
fun.
Prairie Views. This is where all the engineers are strong, all the surveyors are good looking, and all the scientists are above average. And we'll see you here in a couple weeks. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.